Welcome to Rethink Community Podcast, brought to you by Think Tank Inc. I'm your host, John White. For over a decade, Think Tank has been helping people and organizations step into stories of those who face poverty every day. We believe that stories have the power to break through our opinions and positions and bring us together. On this podcast, we bring you real stories from people who have grappled with poverty, faced obstacles, blazed new trails, and forged unlikely relationships. The divisions in our country are not just caused by disagreements. They're fueled by misunderstanding and even contempt. And they can be healed with dignity. Join us in a conversation with Paul Heminger, a dignity builder and storyteller, and learn how each of us can be change makers right where we are.
Welcome. We're so glad to have Paul Heminger here on our Rethink Community podcast with Think Tank Inc. Paul's with Story Connect, and I would love to invite you just to tell us a little bit about your background, Paul. Why is storytelling increasingly central to your work and calling? And what does dignity storytelling mean to you? We're going to be talking about dignity storytelling today.
Hey, listeners. So my background is in social business and social work, which means that social part is the engagement of people in helping them through life, whether that's through entrepreneurship and helping their businesses to thrive, to help themselves and their families because of their talent and skills that they want to offer to the world, or those who are, we all have hurt and pain in our lives, and social work just kind of encapsulates helping each other care for each other through life. So when I think about the barriers that exist between human beings, a lot of those are misunderstandings, fear-based, anxiety, our origin story with our family, this distance. And what storytelling does is that it breaks down so many of those barriers very quickly. When we even think about the people that we most dislike or don't want to engage in, and if we had the open space to hear a part of their story, there would be some sort of redeeming narrative that explains the why behind someone's behaviors. And like that proverbial, iceberg where you only see the very top part of it, we're all that iceberg. And what storytelling does is it helps expose the bottom to each other. And if we do it in a way that is honest and self-affirming and exploratory and curious, then it exposes the bottom half of that iceberg in a way that's dignifying, that isn't forced, it's not exploitive. You're not trying to research a human soul without permission. Storytelling is an exchange of gifts. I give the gift of giving you a part of myself, and you give me the gift of listening and hearing me at that level. So that's why it's becoming increasingly more important to my work, is to have venues, platforms, ways in which those stories can be exchanged, whether that's in dyads individually or in group gatherings or over mediums like this and podcasting. It's a really, really important work.
I love your work, and I actually got to go to an event recently that you helped MC for, and I got to see kind of your passion and your gift in this realm, Paul. And one of the things when we think about trust building, which is kind of the central theme for this series, is that oftentimes, and it's not really been until recently, when we think about storytelling, we may think about reading a book to our kids. We may think about more formalized ways of storytelling, and those things are really important. But also, we tell stories to ourselves and each other all day long. And so stories impact every single interaction that we have. Our interactions are really all about stories. And so when we think about the concept of dignity and human dignity and how that's woven into our stories. You know, I think I shared with you a couple months ago, a colleague of mine shared with me a tool called the Dignity Index. And by the way, for those listening, we're going to put a link to the Dignity Index in our show notes. But basically, the goal of the tool is to reduce division and violence and learn how to solve problems better. And so one of the concepts highlighted in the Dignity Index is this idea that disagreements aren't causing the divisions in our country. It's actually how we behave in the midst of disagreements that causes division. And so the idea that one of the underlying problems in our trust crisis is the contempt that we're seeing in our attitudes and behaviors. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. We can certainly talk about it in the context of storytelling, but also just kind of unpack that a little bit in terms of this idea of how we show dignity to one another in our interactions. So what are your reactions to that? Do you see a connection between contempt and dignity? And how have you see this? You referenced, you have a background in kind of the social sector, right? So how have you seen that play out in that space, maybe at the individual level or, in the community?
Yeah. Boy, oh boy, there's just a lot of layers to that. When I think I'd like to start with the person in the individual talking to themselves. Because how kind am I to myself, right? Brene Brown, if anyone's familiar with her work, uses that phrase a lot, the story I tell myself in my head. And in the story that I'm telling myself, first is kind of like the story about myself. And if we were to verbalize that and make that explicit, it's how kind are we to ourselves? And then if we verbalize how we're thinking or feeling about somebody else and verbalize that, how kind and gracious and generous are we to someone else? And so even knowing that this interview is coming up, I had to look up the definition of the word contempt because, man, that word is scary. Do I have contempt for myself? Do I have contempt for other people? And I looked up the definition, and it's the feeling that a person or a thing is beneath consideration, that it's worthless or deserving scorn. And so I was like, oh, man, do I have that towards myself or others? And then I did this practice where I started to think about the people that really make me upset and angry and the times when I'm really upset with myself. And I verbalize those thoughts and feelings. And I realized that on that scale, which go to that website, the scale of language that we use that comes forth from the soul, out of our mouth, through our head, definitely we have contemptuous language towards ourselves and other people. And I think that seems like there's something in the air, and we can all feel it. And there's different layers to, maybe there's contempt that's come at us, and we have felt shame and distrust of ourselves and another person. So we say something to ourselves, and we have our family that we might have disagreements with, and we have things that we say in our head, and then we hear these things in the public sphere, and it's painful. Like that level of entanglement of scorn, worthlessness, is incredibly painful. And I think that we've kind of normalized that. And then the opposite is true when we watch certain things or we're around certain people with a certain language, vibe, and frequency of unconditional acceptance and love and care and dignified language. Something in us responds and arises to that, and it is healing. And so we're swimming through these waters of our own story, our cultural story, our family of origin story, and it's really messy. It's really messy to navigate.
Yeah, and I would love for you to kind of go in the direction you were headed there, Paul, because I think, unfortunately, we probably can point to lots of examples where each of us maybe have participated in or have witnessed interactions that weren't filled with the kind of dignity that creates trust and fosters change. Yeah. And we need more models of what it looks like to be a person that gives freely dignity, right? And honors people in that way. We need more and more of those models. So I know you and I both are fans of, Father Boyle, I know, is one example, but do you have a couple stories or people that come to mind that really do exude that have that presence? And what have you witnessed in those interactions, in those spaces?
Yeah, there seems like there's a deep fount of healing that someone has experienced or received, and it overflows into their interaction that you have such the high pleasure of receiving. And so, mentioning Father Boyle, I went to go visit Homeboy Industries last July with a group of people, and I would just sit in the lobby and I started crying. And I would sit in the cafe just overwhelmed with because culture eats strategy for breakfast, and the culture of kindness and generosity in that fount of goodness that stems from a belief that all people are wonderful and wonderfully made and unconditionally lovable and loving, is that I witnessed these doses of unconditional positive regard for each human being, whether you were like the highest or the lowest perceived by society. And it was so healing. And I think that what I hope and pray for many people is that they get to experience this on the daily, and hope to give it to others as they hope to transform their culture. And so I think maybe many of us have personal examples of, if we think back of like the most kind and generous person in our lives throughout our life, we can pinpoint a couple of people. I think it's harder to think about certain cultures or atmospheres or organizations that are able to hold that culture really well. And when you find those cultures, man, you just want to be there. I just wanted to be there.
Yeah. And it's, I know it's kind of easy to paint that almost utopian picture, and it feels not accessible. Mm-hmm. But I think what's, Paul, you and I have talked about this, and very much central to our work is that absolutely what you do to try to address poverty, either in your own community or the macro level, like what you do matters. Also, how you do it matters immensely, and I think about, particular space that you're talking about. So some listeners may not be familiar with Homeboy Industries. It's actually been really kind of studied and identified to be one of the most, if not the most effective gang intervention programs and communities in the world. And so you described the environment there. So these are really challenging spaces, people with deep pain, deep trauma. And so some of that, as you said, is really about kind of heart and mind, and what are we doing in our own heart and mind and our stories, The other thing, though, I think that's really evident there is it's in our practice. And that's where it starts to become really practical, I think, for all of us. Yeah. And like you said, at the individual level, we've interacted with people that just, again, yes, in their presence, like part of that heart and mind, but like in things that they literally do. Yeah. I think that's where the Dignity Index is really helpful, is that we can actually look at our behavior and we can choose different kinds of behaviors and live into this a little bit more. So were there any practices that you witnessed when you were there, or other examples that really helped to create that culture?
Yeah, even a little bit more, it's a prison reentry program. 15,000 people come through their doors every year. If you come through their doors, they say that hope has an address. And we would want any place that is about healing to exhibit that hope has an address. And that might be your home. That might be children's services. That might be your school if you're caring for kids. That might be a business, a coffee shop. It can be any place we live, work, or play. Playground, like the vibe, the frequency has a space, because there are all of these dosing of kindness and generosity. It's what's in the eyes. It's what's in the smile. And Father G always says, like, maybe choose your behavior and let your heart and head follow. Like, see, with the left foot, we might try to change our minds, but with our right foot, let's change our behaviors. And then our left foot, and it's an all day, minute by minute, breath by breath practice. And Some people on here might have heard this phrase that I believe in, is that like healing people heal people. And so that being someone that is trying to engage one's own healing and trying to receive unconditional love and self-forgiveness and forgiveness of others can maybe more naturally practice the art and the behaviors and the skills of smiling eyes and smiling faces and extremely kind words. And when we are triggered by something that feels wrong or offensive or scary, that our fight, flight, or freeze can engage, and our behaviors can show that you are unconditionally lovable and remain loving. And, I would listen to 17 hours of him talk after I left. And one of the things that he just always repeats as a man of mantras is that you find home when you love being loving. So no matter where you are, you're a culture shaper and an influencer. And if you're one that's in leadership, that's trying to shape your culture, it starts with you and other allies and advocates to say, like, this is, culture says, this is how we do things around here. Mm-hmm. And that means that if it's not jiving with your own healing and it's so forced, then maybe we need to figure out how we can help you in your own healing so that your behavior on the outside and the resonance on the inside are more aligned and match more. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And, part of what I hear you saying there too is, we can behave our ways into new ways of thinking and feeling. Yeah. But the ideal is that we all have the opportunity to be working in these spaces on ourselves, so that we can transmit and create this presence for others. I do think your encouragement, not only to leaders, but all of us, it doesn't matter where we are, what waters we're swimming in. Mm-hmm. A lot of times I think we have a tendency to maybe devalue our influence. Totally. But there are mantras and practices that we can make a part of our life, and those things can be very transformative. A number of organizations that we work with, Paul, they're in this space, and it doesn't matter where the context is. Like, you named a few early on. Could be in a healthcare space. It could be in a school. It could be in a university or a business, or a nonprofit, church. They're really about the work of connecting with people and lots of different kinds of people. And, many of these organizations are interacting with people who are navigating some real significant challenges. They're navigating poverty and some real significant challenges. And we know that oftentimes there's a legacy of distrust there for good reason. Mm-hmm. There's been discrimination or racism or other things that have, system has not always been easy or friendly or for them. And yet the system, I'm saying that broadly, it's made up of lots of good people that really care. And so there becomes this tension point when we're interacting with people that come with distrust. And it, may not be about you personally, but you represent a system or an organization that I am skeptical about, So if you're that individual that's like working in those organizations and you're trying to overcome these trust barriers, like, again, how does dignity fit into that? What would you say to encourage people that are running up against these obstacles?
I think this is a fair analogy to use in this case, is like this roller coaster example. So when we first get into a roller coaster and we put down a lap bar and we get ready to take a ride, if we're going to take, let's say, a relational ride with the next person who's in front of us. For some people who've been thrown off of the relational ride and been hurt many times, they'll jiggle the lap bar more fiercely than I would. If I've been thrown off the relational ride less, I get in and I lightly tap the lap bar because I have a higher level of trust that this ride is going to take me to a place that I want to go, that I could have fun in, that I'm going to enjoy. But I'm still going to jiggle the lap bar, not in hopes that it flies up, but that it stays and that it's secure. And so when we're engaging with folks on the front lines who have collective mounds of distrust that's held in their bodies, whether it's through, again, their family of origin or the system broadly, through that one person who did that one thing a long time ago and you look like them and you sound like them, and now I'm reacting in a certain way. The person that's wanting to show up to be like the healing, caring person is walking into that situation ought to be expecting that that person should, if they're maybe smart, to like really jiggle that lap bar hard. And that's hard and painful and can be annoying. And over time, the privilege of being someone who is trustable and becoming known as someone who's trustable, like over time, is so beautiful. But it's a long haul journey. Think about any of our relationships in trust and mistrust, between balancing, the task of honesty in relationships with the task of warmth. And if we're a worker in healthcare, education, or social services, if we're a volunteer, if we're a leader of an organization, how much we bring into a moment and how much someone else brings into a moment is just like a messy moment. And what I loved about the culture of Homeboy is that there's such a high level of awareness of the iceberg underneath that it's like, yeah, I expect that I'm going to have to show up to be more loving and loving and loving, and that your action and behavior has a deep reason, and it's probably one of security, keeping you safe. And you can throw what you want at me, but I'm sturdy. I'm not toppleable. You can't topple me. I have a community of other loving people that we can link arms and hold your pain and hold that space for you until you recognize trust in us. And at any moment, you can decide to distrust because of something in your own story. And we can still hold that, even if it's years later. So,
yeah. Yeah. Do you have any maybe words of wisdom or encouragement for folks that are working out on the front line that maybe don't have the privilege that Homeboy has and really committing to people over time?
Yeah.
Maybe they are in a role where they only get to see people and there's a lot of pressure for, 15, 20 minutes. And so it's these quick, what feels like very transactional interactions, but yet so much can be held within those interactions that could change the game for the person in front of them or themselves. Do you have any just encouragement for them? Like, how do I really overcome this and show dignity when I only got 10 minutes with you, Paul?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
what does that look like?
Yeah. I think one thing is I believe in 2x2. I believe that if you are on a healing journey and you want to show up to be someone who's providing healing, that you're doing it alongside of someone who also wants to do that. And the stories that you tell each other about wanting to have the highest level of dignity, love, and care is kind of your accountability to create the stories between you that allow the practice of turning a 30-second, a 5-minute, and a 10-second interaction to be the one that's of highest value and dignity and love and care. And doing healing work by yourself, I don't think is wise. That you always should have a buddy that's tracking in the same direction of trying to be healing and towards oneself and towards others. And I think the other thing is to reflect on those moments where someone has been so kind and generous to you in your everyday interactions that it changed your perception of humanity for a moment. And when we have the opportunity to expose, as if a tribe of people are saying that this is how we do things here, like this is the culture of whatever group identity you subscribe to, it's that you are reinforcing the culture and that you are trying to find that you're trusting yourself and you're trusting the organization and your huge level of influence in that interaction saying, this is how we do things here at Children's Services, at this elementary school, at this hospital that gets a bad rap for customer service. Like, this is how we do in living it out is, one, I think it brings so much joy to one's own life, and it brings joy to the other person's life, and becomes a trusted person as a part of a system that can recognize, oh, wow, we should be more like that. That's what's going to change the game and be more healing, whether it's education, the mind, a hospital, the body, social services, the past and the future, like holding that space, even for the shortest amount of time.
Yeah, I love what you said there about a buddy. I mean, a number of us may not even have put those words to it. We may not even think of ourselves as healers or having the capacity to experience healing and heal, and I hope our listeners are encouraged to think about it that way. But in that, you were talking about culture, and I know for me, I've got a little bit of background in social service myself. And one of the things I didn't recognize, I think, till I was kind of more mature in kind of that journey, is the way in which the stories we told to one another about our clients, about our partners, about, how that significantly shaped the way we showed up for them. Yeah. And so I appreciate you saying, like, the way we call that out, like, wait, what story are we telling ourselves about the other, our clients, our partners, other staff, what stories are we telling? And is that who we want to be? Is that who we are? And so those kind of things in the moment are so powerful. But I think what I hope, Paul, is that even that tool is seen as a tool that teams can adopt.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I've seen the transformation in our team, that I've been able to model that as a leader. Like, this is a story I'm telling myself. Maybe I'm way off. Help me. Or now, wait a second, time out. Is what we're saying actually true and dignifying? Or like, is there more beneath the surface, under the iceberg that we need to investigate here? And so those are examples of practices that can become part of our everyday and part of our teams that start to create those opportunities for more dignity in the moment by moment interactions that maybe we think are insignificant, but are significant. One thing I wanted to reference is many of our listeners have been involved with our work and are familiar with our signature training, the Cost of Poverty experience. And in our virtual experience, we have a virtual application as well. We reference actions that convey dignity and value as an actual application point. So we hope that that's a takeaway. And so one of the things we mention is a couple of patterns that can take place on an individual and corporate level inside our organization that actually creates disconnection. So I want to kind of wrap up our conversation, Paul, with talking a little bit about, the idea of like disconnection, connection. What is it that, naturally shows up, and patterns that we may not even recognize and may even be well-intentioned effort on our part, but we're creating disconnection versus connection. So a couple that we talk about, the first is the spectator effect. So I think all of us can relate to this if we're on social media. That's like exhibit A of the spectator effect. We get the little sound bites into each other's lives and we make judgments and we think we're in each other's lives. Or the way that this plays out, well, we know right now we've been in March Madness. And for those of you that, are into college basketball, you understand like that idea of like, I'm here on the sidelines, I'm a spectator, but I know exactly what people in the game should be doing. Right. And so we do this to other people. Like we get these little snippets of their lives in our interaction and we're just spectators, but we think, we know what's best. Or even the expert effect, where we have an expertise to bring to the table through education or our knowledge. And because we're the expert, we kind of distribute that into people's lives without really gaining perspective, right? That they're their own experts in their own lives. And so those are a couple things that I think are very common that we do when we're interacting with people, certainly people that are navigating poverty, because I'm supposed to be a helper. So I'm a spectator and making judgments, or I'm an expert trying to fix. So that's one example, but I'd love for you to unpack kind of a little bit from your perspective when we think about connection and dignity. What would you have to say to that? What do you think in terms of that we can do to create more connection inside our organizations?
One of the big things that we say at Story Connect is that we don't have a resource problem. We have a connection problem. And our level of connection, again, with ourselves, with other people, and with those that we're trying to serve are meant to be at its highest ideal healing conversations and healing orientation. So when we are in the teacher's lounge, the break room, around the water cooler, going through a cope or a V-cope and putting on a spectator or expert lens is really a disconnection problem. Whereas the connection solution is lived curiosity, deep leaning in and listening and exhibiting that through our self-talk, our talk within our organization, and then it overflows and is experienced with those that we're serving. So, COPE and VCOPE is meant to help us move not our heads, but our heads and heart at the same time into an embodying curiosity to feel in our body what it's like to live just a moment of someone's life within their version of their iceberg, and to know that we've only experienced a moment of knowing. And so then the task is to become more and more curious individually and collectively, which means owning our influence to the other person within the organization to build deeper and richer connections with those that we're seeking to serve.
I love that word, curiosity, Paul. And I think, circling back to the very beginning and thinking about that idea that where we don't see dignity, what's underneath that? Well, sometimes it's contempt. And where does that come from? We could quit being curious. Mm-hmm. I've already figured you out.
Yeah.
You're on the other side. You represent something that, maybe is distasteful to me or an experience I had and so when we quit being curious, we miss our opportunity to share stories and to listen to stories. And the more stories we're able to share in that way, then we can begin to see each other more as human. So that just flows out of us. So that's kind of what I'm taking away from our conversation is the importance of that and staying curious and being really present in those opportunities that we have. Yeah, as we wrap up, Paul, I would love to just give you an opportunity to anything that's kind of left on your heart and mind that you want to share with our audience. And also if you want to share with them how they can connect with you and your work at Story Connect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think something that came up from what we were just talking about is, it's good to have little things that we can take with us forever. And one of those things, if anybody knows the work of Bruce Perry and the childhood trauma training and work that he does, is that the question of curiosity is not, why are you doing that? That's that language that's on the lower half of behavior. Why? But that a higher and a deeper and a more looser and more joyful question is, what happened to you? What is your story? And that's the level of question that we can ask ourselves. Why am I feeling this way? What happened to me? What freedom am I trying to walk into? But there's a barrier that has something to do with some part of my story that is preventing me from a certain level of looseness, freedom, living out of kindness and generosity. There's a thread back there somewhere that needs to be healed. So I think for me, the work of Story Connect, and if you want to find it, storyconnect.love, .org and .com are taken. And really this is all about receiving love that heals us and allowing that to overflow to wherever we live, work, and play, and for whom our hearts break. And if we only try to give love without the first act of trying to receive love, then we're going to be giving from an empty cup. We can't give what we don't have. And so for those who are seeking, some of my work is those who are trying to do something in the world. They have a mission. You look on your left and your right, there's other people that are trying to do it the same. And there's a lot of people who care about that same work. How can we help connect and interconnect that tribe of people, create on-ramps for others, to create healing cultures and ecosystems of collective impact for A, B, C, or D. And so in many ways, like, we're a part of one tribe, Think Tank and Story Connect, and so many others where you live, care deeply about the how of caring for those who have harder stories. You know, I think some of the most dignified language that I've heard is kids from hard places, people from hard stories. How can we, erase the us and them so that there's just us, and just us is justice, where we know that we're trying to be for each other. When so many people say that they're against this or against that, how can we together be for something and wade through the messiness that allows for a much richer and bigger and deeper outcome of care and healing for our cities, for our causes, for our kids.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Paul Heminger, thanks for being with us. Very heartfelt word, and we appreciate your heart, your work, and look forward to connecting more.
Yeah.
So thanks again.
And can I just say, I appreciate you as a listener, because I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I know that the content that I receive, I do so intentionally to help try to connect and transform myself. So you are doing the hard work of engaging your family, yourself, your streets, your organizations, your cities, and keep going. Don't lose heart. Find the other healing agents on your left and right. Build those trusting relationships, and fill your cup up. Receive that love and give it. You're doing a great job.
This has been the Rethink Community Podcast, brought to you by Think Tank Inc., with music by Elijah Hamilton. Don't forget to subscribe to hear upcoming episodes featuring the stories of other courageous individuals we think you should know. And if you're part of an organization that would like to be better equipped to serve people in poverty, be sure to check out the resources we offer, including the Cost of Poverty Experience, or COPE, at thinktank-inc.org/COPE. Join the hundreds of businesses, schools, colleges, churches, and healthcare providers that have used the Cost of Poverty Experience, along with our other suite of tools and coaching to find new ways of thinking and responding to poverty.